Welcome, everyone, to the It's About Time Writers Reading Series. I believe we're at number 406 tonight, but it's completely safe to say that this is the September reading of our series. Very happy to have you all here. I know that many of you are curious about when we will be able to do a hybrid and in-person version, and I have to admit, I haven't pressed it too much because this allows me to join you from Massachusetts and have people like Sandy in Connecticut. Who knows where you all are? So my hope is that as we continue this wonderful series now in its 33rd, borderline 34th year, that we will continue to be able to record it and be available perhaps in person and online. So welcome. I am very happy tonight to be able to introduce and finally hear the works of Danielle Hayden. She was scheduled to read with her Jack Straw cohorts last October, but there was an illness, I believe, with her and her daughter, and so she was rescheduled. And 11 months later, we finally get to hear her. And then we will have Lana Hechtman Ayers and Risa Denenberg. I have not, I should bring a piece of paper in case anybody wants to let me know about doing the open mic. Welcome to all of you. First person I'd like to introduce is Danielle. Danielle, say hi.
Good evening.
There you go. So, Danielle Hayden is a writer originally from Detroit. Last year, Danielle received the 2022 fellowship from the Jack Straw Cultural Center and completed the Yale Writers Workshop. She also received a 2022 grant for Artist Progress from Artist Trust. This year, she was accepted to the Writers Workshop with Tin House. Her work has been published in the Dilly Dune Review, the Los Angeles Review of Books, Ampersand, and elsewhere. She is currently working on an essay collection as well as a novella. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to read two shorter pieces tonight, both pretty new. The first one, in fact, is extremely new, as in like written this week. So draft form. It is yet untitled. It was a response to a prompt that I saw a while back to engage with a document that was important to you. And I had just written a few bullet points a while ago, but I decided to return back to that prompt. And the document I chose to write about is my marriage license. Every keepsake, document, or record is a ghost of a thing. Christina Sharp. I studied the license as one would a relic, line by line, my surveying careful and intentional, brows furrowed over the creased coal of my cat eye. The address of the church was 423, same numbers as my birthday. Fate, I had thought, it was fate. I was 25 and he was nearly 25, and we'd been together nearly 6 years already, college sweethearts since sophomore year. Some said we were too young, but we weren't. The problems that came later had nothing to do with youth. I looked at my signature and the soft curve of the letter J that began a surname I had fully planned on assuming, but would later decide not to take. The name of the woman I was expected to become, but would never be, and a part of a family to which I would never truly belong. The document I was looking at was actually the second version of our license. The first, signed in our haste and excitement, had been in blue ink and was rejected by the state of Michigan for our navy-colored infraction. This second, obediently signed in black, was never taken back to the minister. We were in our newlywed apartment on Seattle's Capitol Hill by the time we got the rejection notice, and was never resubmitted to be solemnized. So we've been married for a decade, but technically we were never married, officially speaking. There was distress in this knowing, but in the back of my mind was also relief. I could leave whenever I wanted to, walk away without the messiness of legalities, or not as many of them anyway. I find comfort whenever I think about leaving, which is something that comes to my mind with increasing frequency. I'm always standing there, at the edge of a decision. The feeling of home had long begun to sway, teetering under the weight of its own strangeness. The corners of the license were folded under and slightly yellowing, like an old book someone had put down and never returned to. I remembered when it was crisp, fresh, new. In my mind, I went back to all the befores, places I could never go back to. The birth, the burials, the between, the betrayal. Mine, I should add, not his. Was it too late for this document, for us? Years ago, a call to the state office had told me that all hope was not lost, that I could fix this if I wanted to. But did I want to fix it, any of it? Discussions of carpet and curtains, but little else these days as we shifted to the familiar patois of familiarity, or days with barely any words exchanged at all. Lingerie with the tags still on and drawers unopened, brushing our teeth in unison though not united, empty stares into the bathroom mirror before his back was always to me in bed. And my ire towards him since we had become parents, resentment growing, often attacking his particular brand of fathering like the swarm of ants on a sugar cube. Mother anger, how much was inherited or birthright? How much from my lineage, from the lineage of all women? Would I allow my temper to be tempered by time? I was the doting, nurturing mother, but often the pissed off wife. I had only to extend my hand to him, the easiest of alchemies, our love. It was still there. I could see it like the edge of a leaf beneath a dusting of snow. If I wanted to, I could summon the sun again. He was waiting for me to initiate, to come back. But the contours of our lives had shifted outward and away from each other, and I had done nothing to stop it and was in fact doing nothing to slow its progress. It was not bad, but there was something in me that would not allow it to be good anymore. The gray, a truce. I flipped over to the back of the marriage license, almost the entire page covered in the scribbles of a teal pen, the work of our then toddler, Jackson Pollock, in training. I wondered where I was when this happened, perhaps running the rare errand, or maybe I'd managed a shower that day. I wagered that it had probably happened under my husband's less than watchful eye. It was something I would have caught. Our daughter's scribbles brought with it the echoes of motherhood and its adjuncts, the exhaustion, the resignation, its many concessions, the many plans it thwarts. I still feel that longing regularly, something that beckons, that makes me feel that I have stretched and have outgrown this life. It often felt, as Chimamanda Adichie had once written, that it was like living in a nice house, but always staring out the window. There is still love, and there are still vows. He is still good, and we have a daughter. For now, I'm staying, but as this document shows, I can leave anytime. Thank you. And for the next thing I'm going to read, I've never read fiction before. I very rarely write fiction, but this is a chapter in the a draft of a chapter of the novella that I'm working on. It's set in South Africa during apartheid. It is a love story, but that comes much later. And there are a lot of terms that are in a different language that you might not recognize, so I'll put those in the chat really quickly. Sorry for taking more time, but
No problem. Take the time.
I listed them in order that they appear in the document I'm going to read. So, and the name of the novella, or it may turn into a novel, is The Cape of Good Hope. Chapter 1, Greyton, South Africa, 1984. A goat's throat was slit the morning of the burial. As was Xhosa tradition, An animal was to be slaughtered in solemn ritual called the umkapo, cooked without spices, then consumed outside of the home by all who grieved for the departed before any other food could be eaten. Liama felt sorry for the goat and did not understand why the practice had to be carried out. Her father's life had been taken. Why must another be slain in turn? Such a tradition did not make sense to her. And Liama resented the expectation that she would bear with grace any further sight of blood. The metallic smell alone threatened to upturn her stomach. Tradition or no, she would not ingest the beast. Even if she had, even temporarily, been able to suspend her moral objection, her appetite had dwindled so much that she doubted that she could summon any desire later to taste the dikuku, her favorite sweet scones that flirted with ginger and lemon zest. Liama shifted, noting that her black dress already fit a little more loosely on her body now. She had seen 12 winters and was starting to become a woman, but this week she felt and looked more like a little girl. Liama remembered that she was not the only one inhumed in despondency. She wondered where her younger cousin Ntando was, the boy whom she called brother. He had gone even more deeply into himself than he had before. Since Themba's death, more demons had joined the legion that already occupied Ntando's tortured mind. Liama ambled down the dirt path, squinting all the way. She did not feel that the sun should be out today. It felt wrong, like an insult to her father's memory. Her mother would probably say something about the weather being a sign, that Tata wanted them to be happy, to carry on. Liama scoffed at such things. She was sure that she would find Ntando under the great baobab tree. For what it lacked in provision of shade, it was his place of solace and safety. She was right. Ntando was sitting, pulling up blades of grass in rapid succession, as if in a trance. Ntando, she said. Liama knew he heard her, but said nothing. She waited a few moments before moving closer to him. Liama squatted, softly putting her hands over his, noticing how tightly his fingers gripped the once growing grass, how red and raw his pale hands looked. We should get back. We don't want to miss the beginning. Ntando still offered no reply, not even a nod. But her cousin stood and accompanied her back to the gathering, careful to avert his gaze, though the community had always done the same for the likes of him. He hung back, in line with Liama's footsteps, but lingering a couple meters behind. Liama saw her mother approaching and was awed by her beauty. And Mama was the best kind of beautiful, the kind that did not need to announce itself. Children, Nobomi spoke, relieved to see her daughter and nephew. I was wondering where you'd gone off to. Come now, we are about to start. Ntando found his aunt's rich voice soothing, like a salve, so like a mother's should be. He wondered if his own would make an appearance on this occasion. They arrived in the crowd. Liama was astonished by how many people were in attendance. Folks from all over Grayton had come to pay their respects, but others had traveled from beyond their borders. She guessed that some of these must be from Tata's network of activists. Liama was touched by their presence, but selfishly she wished for a moment that it were one of them being buried today, and not her dear father. Liama knew that what her father did was important, but she had also known it was dangerous. The government's efforts to quash resistance had only intensified. Just the year before, in June of 1983, 3 men had been executed for an attack on a police station in Wonderboom, and others had been killed. The homes of activists were bombed, an air raid launched as a punitive measure and to instill fear. This year, opposition had only grown stronger. She had heard stories from her grandfather and elders about the Soweto uprisings in 1976, but she could sense that they were only seeing the edges of the crucible, and that for good or ill, tremendous change would come to South Africa's sons and daughters. She only hoped that she would live to see it. Tears welled in her eyes as she remembered her father never would. Was it any wonder that Themba had been caught in the crossfire? Liama looked up, trying to blink her tears away and collect herself. Her wide eyes stopped on her pale yellow bicycle propped against the doors of the shed, paint chips smashed into the ground from the last time she had used it. She recalled her father's strong, dark hands dwarfing her own as he helped guide the handlebars as he taught her to ride it. He had always known when to let go and let her soar. She had not ridden it in days and was not sure when she could will herself to ride again. How long it would be before her bike collected dust, before it began to rust. She could still hear and even feel their merriment swirling around her, moments of mirth dancing a pas de deux. He had introduced his record collection to her, and they had danced to artists like Miriam Makeba and Brenda Fassi, but the sweetest symphony had always been the sounds of their laughter. Her thoughts were interrupted by the beginning of the theta. A family elder began talking to her father's body to ease the process of entering into the afterlife. The rest of the family was supposed to talk to the ancestors, intermediaries between the dead and to God, to help her father complete his journey. But Liema was in no mood to speak to the ancestors. She did consider talking to God, to ask him why he had allowed her father to perish, why he allowed apartheid in the first place. But her fear of a nosy neighbor overhearing was greater even than angering any deity. So instead she mouthed ancestral communication, pretending to carry out her filial duty. She saw Oweltu, her father's right-hand man. He had shaved his hair as a sign of mourning, the back of his bald head gleaming under the bright sun. He was flanked by his wife and 4 children, their eyes downcast. Olwetu was taller, darker, and had sharper features than Themba, yet people had often mistook Olwetu and Themba for brothers, their fraternity and friendship carrying more clout than dissimilar features and physique. They often let people believe it and felt like spirit brothers besides, even if not true kinsmen. Liema looked up at her mother, a somber expression with a single tear that spilled down and stopped mid-flow, as if to kiss her exquisite cheekbone. Then the singing began. The chorus of mourners was a moving tribute indeed, and more than Liema could stand, and their clapping echoed in her ears like death knells. She noticed that someone was singing slightly off-key, but wagered that it was noticeable only to those who carry music in their hearts. Liema looked around and saw the guest. It took a moment to place the woman, not just because the seasons had passed since Liema last saw her, but because time had not been kind to the woman. She looked much older, weathered. It was her Aunt Juma, her mother's sister. She wondered if her cousin knew his mother was there. One glance back at him gave her the answer. He had seen her. The tension in the air was palpable. And then it flashes back to the day that her father died. This next part. Liema, Liema. She barely heard her mother's voice calling out to her from down the road. Liema sighed, continuing to watch the clouds pass over her, imagining that they were carrying her somewhere else, somewhere she could wander all day, a place of no plates or pleats. I'll get up in just a few more minutes, she thought. She was summoned again, the voice closer this time. In no mood for her mother's scolding, Liema stood up and brushed the grass from her clothes and hair. Liema, come here! The timbre was closer still, and wholly unfamiliar. Liema's stomach knotted. She hastened to meet her mother, seeing the woman's eyes wide with fright. It's your father, she began. What happened? Asked Liema. Her mother took her hand and they sprinted back up the road to the house, the aroma of her mother's cooking making her mouth water nearly as much as her eyes. Liema's father, Themba, lay on the floor, his head propped up on a pillow that her umakulu had stitched for their home. Her mother was at his side, and his father's oldest friend, Olwetu, stood above him. His deep voice, usually cheerful, was somber as he spoke. The police came and broke up the rally. They started beating us. Your father was struck in the head. After we finally made our way through the crowd, I managed to get him to the hospital, but they refused to treat him. I was going to try to get him to another one, but he just wanted to come here so he could say goodbye. No, Tata, cried Liema as she went beside her father, across from her mother. Liema grasped his right hand, the light beads of the amaso he always wore grazing her wrist. She tried to ignore the speed at which the carmine-colored stain was spreading across the pillow. As Temba started speaking, he struggled to breathe, his tongue hanging for a moment like a piece of raw fish at the market. I love you. I love you so much, he said between shallow breaths. Being your father has brought me the greatest joy, he said as his voice broke. Temba turned to his wife, who urged him to stop talking and save his strength. He ignored her admonishing and continued, summoning all the strength he could muster. Nobomi, you made me the luckiest man in the world. I am sorry I'm leaving you so soon, but I promise that we will meet again one day. Liema could not look at her father for fear she would shatter. She could only hear the woman's weeping, gentle and ladylike, even in these circumstances. Nobomi felt despondency, but no shock. She had known that this day may come, had tried her best to prepare for it. Temba winced from the pain as he raised his head to see Liema's 9-year-old cousin, Ntando, his gray eyes peeking around the corner. Ntando, I know I am not your father, but I've always loved you like a son. You are the man at home now. You are young, but you must be strong. Take care of Liema and your umakazi. Liema and Nobomi remained at Temba's side for the minutes of his life that remained. Olwetu stood over them, and Liema took some modicum of comfort in his shepherding shadow. Ntando stayed back and absorbed the scene in silence, as was his way. In their grief, they had forgotten about the umfino and onkombotis cooking on the stove. The scorching sorghum and spinach singed Liema's nostrils. She turned away, only for the smell to meet and merge with her father's blood in the air. She gagged at the olfactory offense, trying not to let the nausea overwhelm her lest she dishonor his still warm body. The unfinished onkomboti began spilling over the large pot on the paraffin stove, and down, down, down it flowed, heading toward them like a noxious poison that they felt powerless to stop. Thank you.
Wow. I'm so glad you were able to read as far as you did and bring it, although you've left us, quite the last olfactory and visual image. I also want to take this opportunity to remind people, many people think that It's About Time, although founded mostly on poetry, we are multi-genre. And this was an incredible opportunity to hear you do, as you said, your foray into fiction, as well as, your other essay piece. And I really appreciate that, the differing, your differing work that you brought to us tonight. I also want to challenge everybody to write to me and tell me which document you decide to write about in the next month. It's like one of those things. I swear I want to do it right away. And I think we should all share this and maybe even have a themed reading in about a month, or not a month, a year from now. So we'll call it the Danielle Hayden, annual reading. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I went over. I did.
No, I'm so excited. We only have 3 readers tonight, so perfect opportunity.
Well, I'm usually really good about time, and I respect people. So yeah, thank you for allowing me.
Absolutely, our pleasure. All right, our next reader tonight is Lana Hechtman, and I should have asked if you pronounce it Ayers or Ayers. So say hello, Lana, so I know how to pronounce your name.
Thank you so much for having me, Peggy. It's Lana Hechtman Ayers.
Ayers. Okay, now I can do a proper introduction. She bills herself as cat mama, dog mama, sky watcher, recovering coffee addict, and a former New Yorker. Lana Hechtman Ayers writes in a room over her garage. Her work appears in such places as Rattle, The London Reader, Peregrine, MacGuffin, and Verse Daily. She's the author of 8 full-length poetry collections. The most recent are When All Else Fails and Overtures. Lana also delves into romantic time travel fiction and mystery. She leads generative writing workshops in the Amherst method, helps poets assemble their own collection, facilitates a Zoom poetry book club, and manages 3 small poetry presses. She also spends entirely too many hours watching HGTV and solving cryptograms with her spouse in Newport, Oregon, a town famous for its barking sea lions. Please feel free to visit her at her eponymous lanaayers.com. Welcome, Lana.
Thank you so much, Peggy. It's such a delight to be here, especially with Risa Denenberg, who I adore, who's not only a Moonpath Press poet, but a dear friend, and with my new favorite writer, Danielle Hayden. So it's a delight. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to be reading some poems tonight from Overtures, which is just out. And the first one I'm going to read is a poem in the beginning of the book. When I put my own manuscripts together, I like to include poems that kind of welcome the reader in or share experiences that I think the reader will have in common with the poet. So this is one of the first poems in the book, and it's called Always. Always the crows hopping along the lawn, pecking at potential wormy happiness, and mostly coming up empty. Always clouds reeling across vast movie screens of sky, high overhead, or hugging horizon's hills like long-lost family. Always the night storms sighing and shrieking in the black hours, waking you from restful sleep to wonder if what wanders outside is thicker than air and scarier. Always the downtown evening traffic inching along like so many tin-eared slugs blowing trumpets. Always the first whiff of coffee, an aria of clarity, sun burning away mind fog. Always the silver candlelight of stars whose dark wax never melts, nor wicks burn down as they reel in an arcing trajectory from sea to sea. Always the waves, over and over, like cool smoke that billows a thrilling brine of before time and after. Always autumn's sacred librettos, bare branches conducting thousands of wind-wetted orchestras. Always the moon, exotic dancer of conceal and reveal, shimmying her crystal halo. And I've never had a good memory for names, not even when I was a young person. It's just not something I ever was good with. And I always remember faces and experiences, thankfully, but names, not so much. And it's getting much worse as I'm getting older. This poem is called Balm. Never mind memory's forgotten name, the tiny restaurant in the cove where we tried oysters and you nearly choked on your first slurp. Never mind the double exposure of cornfields, sunlit, then cloudburst. Never mind the snapshots of strangers who are family too many times removed. Pelicans soar about like an army of animated scissors, cutting away more of what I should remember. I have waited at bus stops for silver linings, gotten tipsy sipping champagne moonlight. And still, when I try to recall you, my lost sheep, purple ink flows from the tip of my tongue onto the page like the apocalypse of aged wine. Somewhere in the shadows of my mind, we're skipping rope, jumping over chalk-numbered squares, casting a single stone. And I don't know how many of you are fans of classical music, but I think it's King FM. And every Sunday they have the Sunday brunch show. And always at 10 a.m. comes on the song Dolce de Coco as performed by Yo-Yo Ma. And it's one of my favorite songs. And I really am sad if I miss hearing it at 10 a.m. And this is an ekphrastic poem written after listening to that song. It's called If Only. A gentleness, a sadness as the cello strings vibrate chills up my spine. Guitar plucks defying pluckiness into the mist of a Sunday morning, some 60 years hence from the day I emerged from the swampy cavern of creation into arid light. I want to say it's been milk and cookies ever since. Blue hydrangeas, a hearth of glowing embers. Truth is agony, falls like overripe apples from long neglected orchards, gravity discovered again and again and again. Entire forests are becoming smoky afterburn. What are regrets but wishes drowned in flood-swollen rivers? Time can be electric, but mine, mostly dead batteries. For the sake of love, if ever there were love, do not mourn me. Incinerate me in a blameless oven. Scatter my ash on a cloudy evening so that overnight rains wash away all evidence of nobody's life. This next one kind of plays with physics and love a little bit. I'm kind of a little bit of a science geek and a math geek, and you'll find that in many of my poems sneaking in. This is called Flight of Particles. We have spoken of a physics that defies logic, intuition, the same way we have suggested lilacs will always embody a certain summer that continues on in our cell linings, ghosts our synapses, a mingling of lips, damp, trembling, that signaled a shift in knowledge, not the loss of innocence or end of childhood, but an experiment gone right, a powerful claiming of self, crossing the boundary of self into other, into communion. Sometimes we witness wind floating clouds across the moon, and for a moment, it is the moon we see rushing away. We learn by trial. Observation is never pure. Intent can be an instrument one must practice for years before a song emerges from fingertips as loveliness. We were lucky. The breeze that evening from the east, the stars hidden, even the size of the scythe of the moon that could have ruined everything, did not. In a universe that extols the quantum and the mechanical, a kiss may be only an accident, an unruly flight of pheromone particles, but at least there is always some probability of sweetness. This next poem is a complete fantasy that I hope one day will become a reality. This is called Elegy for War. After the last bombs exploded, silence deafened the world for several decades. People took to speaking in gestures, holding arms out in front of themselves, wide open, which led to stepping forward into more hugs, led to extravagant foraging for wild berries. Vehicles of insurgents became homes to bats and rats. Only grouchy bears ever ventured near them. NATO morphed into a travel agency with free weeknight stays across Greenwich Mean. Everyone, everywhere, took up writing postcards to be delivered either by sled or pony, according to the weather, shared recipes for soup, recited from memory their favorite poems. And this is my 2-poem warning. This first one's really short. And I'm dedicating this to everyone in this room. Try to remember that light offers no advice but to shine. when it is your time. And it is always your time. And this last poem I'm going to read is by another poet that I hope that you will look up and read if you don't already know her work. She's a UK-based poet of Indian background, and her poem appears actually in this new anthology that you've probably heard of. It just came out by James Cruz, edited by James Cruz, The Wonder of Small Things, Poems of Peace and Renewal. And I just like opened it at random this morning and found this poem, and I want to read it to you for your kindness and generosity of your time and attention. And the poet's name is Nikita Gill. It's called Your Soft Heart. You are still the child who gently places fallen baby birds back in their nests. You are still the soft soul that gets your heart broken over cruel words and awful acts when you watch the news. You are still the gentle heart who once tried to heal a flower by attempting to stick its petals back on when ignorant feet trampled it. This is why you are important. This is why you will always be needed. Kindness is the greatest endangered thing. And here you are, existing, your heart so full with it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a lovely, generous thing to introduce, to share that one and to introduce all to this new work. So thank you so much, Lana. I know you do so much for the whole writing community. On behalf of all of us, thank you.
And thank you, Peggy. You're running these readings and offering us all this generous work.
Oh, just, Esther tapped me. Esther Helfgott, tapped me. I just have to keep on, doing it for Esther, who's, done so much for the whole Seattle community. I want to take this opportunity to say, give you a little preview of coming attractions. And that is that having been introduced to Danielle by last year's as a Jack Straw writer, next month I see Priscilla Long is here tonight. She is the curator for the Jack Straw 2023 writers. And October has become our annual month to have what we call a crossover event. And we'll be featuring up to 4 to 5 of this year's writers next month. November will be my sort of pet group, the Ballard Writers Collective. We may have up to 14 readers reading small, short, 5-minute pieces, and I assign them a topic that they can interpret any way they want, language of the body. And then in December, I've been working for a long time to get the folks, many of the movers and shakers of the Northwest Narrative Medicine Group to come and participate. And then we're going to kick off the new year with Seattle's civic poet, Chinyi Pai, is curating a special evening in January. Whoa. And I have already decided that the idea that was inspired by Danielle's first piece about writing based on a document, I'm scheduling that for September 2024. So you guys all have first dibs on it. I've decided the evening will be called Documentation. So I'm serious. Let's do this, people. Start thinking about what document, start submitting. You're here tonight. Nobody else but you guys know about this. So let's do it. Okay. Our next reader tonight is someone that I have not heard before, but when I asked Lana if there was anyone else she'd like to have read with her, she did not hesitate. So please let us prepare to welcome Risa Denenberg. Risa, you want to go ahead and say hello? Perfect.
Hi.
Thank you. Risa is coming to us tonight from Squim, where she works as a nurse practitioner. She is co-founder of Headmistress Press, Press. I don't know why I said press. Head Mistress Press curates the Poetry Cafe online and is the reviews editor at Rivermouth Review. She has published 8 collections of poetry, most recently the chapbook Posthuman, which is a finalist for the Floating Bridge Press Chapbook Contest of 2020, and Rain Dweller, Moonpath Press 2023. She is currently working on a memoir in progress, Mother Interrupted. Welcome, Risa.
I'm just so thrilled to be reading and to get to hear Danielle, new to me, and I'm going to follow your work. And Lana, who has just been a wonderful friend and editor and poet and everything. And thank you for inviting me. I'm going to read poems from various places, but my new book, it's probably coming out backwards, is Rain Dweller. And I've shifted over the 15 years, I think, I've been out here from the East Coast, and I now consider myself a Pacific Northwest poet. The first poem I'm going to read is How Two Trees Become a Forest, for Arthur Z., who made these characters, who put these characters on the chalkboard during a workshop with him, a lovely workshop. A teacher draws Chinese characters on the chalkboard to show how two trees become a forest. Chalk is soft white limestone composed of the shells of foraminifers. A student looks up the Chinese character for shell. An Afghani schoolgirl covers her head and walks to the schoolhouse with broken windows. She tells her teacher she hopes to become a doctor. I bring soup to a neighbor who tells me she hopes to die soon. The girl on the radio sings, "My body's in trouble." I wonder, will I die alone? A lonely boy pauses in front of a girl sketching a forest of firs and yews. Their branches barely move in the humid haze of noon. An infant grabs the wooden slats of her crib and pulls herself up to cry out for her mother. I think how much is lost without these signs to guide us. Foraminifers are single-celled amoebae. The foramen ovale is a hole in the heart that must close at birth. I'm going to read Ice Would Suffice. There was some really good news for me about this poem, which appeared some time ago, in that an artist who I don't know is doing a show. I think it's opening tonight. And he used the first line of this poem as the title for his show. And I just happened to find out and communicate with him, but I thought that was just lovely. A real collaboration. Ice Would Suffice. How swift, how far the sea carries a body from shore. Empires fail, species are lost, spotted frogs and tufted puffins forsaken. After eons of fauna and flora, hominids have stood for mere years, baffled brains atop battered shoulders. In a murky blanket of heavens, an icy planet made of diamond spins. Our sun winks like the star it was billions of years ago, without ambition. We bury bodies in shallow dirt, heedless of lacking space, or how long our makeshift planet will host us. This poem is called Yellow Star, and it references the fire in 1911 at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in Manhattan, where 146 women, mostly Jewish and Italian immigrants, died. They were locked in, and many jumped to their deaths. Yellow Star. In my case, the yellow star will be made of 2 perfect pink triangles, cut from cheap dry goods at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, where the women sew stars on at the ready, hunched over their singers, and not wasting time on stairs, work right up to closing time, then jump. They didn't want to die so young, and neither did the gay boys who died in droves at the close of the last century. I would be one who would beg you to shoot me. who would know that borders lie, that I could not endure the march through the woods and the snow to the trains at the end. We who say never forget also know that it could happen again to us. And we do not know any more now than we did then how to make it stop. The stitching never ends. In practice, I have sutured my arm to my sleeve with triangles made from pages torn from the book of Job. Selfie at Deception Pass. Those of you who live out here know the bridge over Deception Pass. Amazing bridge, amazing spot. You can't say you didn't know you would drown here. There was no deception. The application clearly stated rain dwellers only. You didn't come here planning to jump. You're not a planner. The bridge soars 180 feet above the narrows. Click. Clutching at the safety mesh, buffeted by crosswinds, waters churning below, you pray an enormous cormorant will swoop down to bear you away. You only came here to flee the voices, to unwind amid the tall, reedy grasses that grow along ponds and stitch these brackish waterways. The regret that rises in your throat during the descent was predictable. Instead of flight, perhaps you should have rode. The hell that flung you here debarked with you. Like you, they are only obeying instinct, seeking Arctic shrubs. These geese flying north in winter. I didn't know geese flew north in winter, but some do apparently. This is another selfie. I have several poems that are selfie poems in Rain Dweller. Apocalypse selfie. After decades of careening, we landed here, searching for a feather of hope, not a head in the oven. We spend most of our time trying to steer our solitary ships in the storm. I knew the day would come when we'd see each other as enemies. We love what we love, and we hate what we don't love. Let's just say the world is too much with us, or is it we are the world? When I was 17, so many wounded men told me to smile. My future vanished, as if a girl's smile could save anyone. In this town are old and sick 90-somethings waiting in their wheelchairs, baggy sweats worn over their depends, 2 world wars and a bowl of dust to eat when all the banks failed. No one tells their stories anymore. If I were prone to regret, I'd admit I've failed to fully love what I love. We have failed the future. Our breasts are the drooping ice shelves of Antarctica. Our gall is burning and brimmed with stones. Denial hung on our fragile limbs until they snapped. I hate to close the book with this sad refrain. I'd rather toast the future, say, phew, we barely dodged that one. But all of Cascadia is burning. It's a miracle. You can stare right into the sun and not go blind. Cul-de-sac. 1. The doe slept on my lawn again this morning, having shooed her spotted twins to glean their own pastures. I studied my unshorn yard, my habitat, the dewy grass, having shooed my own featherless from the nest long ago. Seemed a quiet morning, fog rolling in across the bay, tomato plants showing off yellow buds, sunny sides for breakfast, chickens crackling in their pen, my toast dry, my coffee black. Someday I will mow this rowdy yard, coax my neighbors to speak to me again. Change rustles the page for a moment, a blustery warning. I stop by to check on him, my usual, bearing eggs, the one I call Uncle on this friendless cul-de-sac. 2. By the time they carried his body to the curb with flashing lights, neighbors had begun to gather in the street, shoeless, tank tops, bathrobes. A dog licked my shin. A girl I'd never seen rambled on about how he owed her something. I gave my name to the cop. I told the story start to finish. I checked for pulse, for breaths, my lips on his. I counted 1, 2, 3, all the way to 30. They turned off the flashers, pulled the sheet. After the dentist, I decided to put this one in. So if you remember that the name of my memoir in progress is Mother Interrupted, that you might know something about why. After the dentist, I slip into a lustreless bistro and order oysters. I'm always wishing people would just shut up. It's 2:45 and I was foolishly hoping to be alone. Passing thoughts are couplets uncaptured, run aground by conversations I've no choice but to catch. I want a quiet that tastes like slices of lemon floating on Arctic sea. When the waitress doesn't bring bread, I don't eat bread. I'm not interested in intercourse. I lost custody of my son when he was barely 5. I've learned to do without. I always return to the written word. It lasts longer and leaves a better trace. I'm not lost out here in my small craft. I'm writing, not lonely. This is a poem about a patient, and it's for Mary. The fragrance of crushed fruit. Another patient died today. I know the scent, a scent I know well, but not at all, crumpled into a promise made 5 years ago when it was time to retire, to go on at least until she died, never planning beyond this moment. I can't describe this feeling, the way clouds claim nothing as they darken into rain. I waited expectantly, impatient at times, for suffering to end, but hers or mine. Does it comfort the family to say now the heavy lifting is over? How her longing for heaven softened that bed? Tears surprised me today. I've held back so much for so long. I'm scored along the edge, chest ripe for rending. Yet haven't I walked this path before, strewn with the cloying scent of Easter lilies, my own left behind longings, my litany of corpses? Dare I count them? Oh, death, you are not a river, but I have careened your banks my whole career, studying your silences, submitting to your elegies. Another Mary plants her son at my feet, so I will know how deep pain can run. But who can know the sorrows of another? I choke over words, feel the soft stir of her in the air, and isn't this fragrance her must? The crushed fruit of her? Oh, death, walking past you so often I look the other way. Ask the buried to forgive the inelegant clatter of my steps. Bake sunflowers in the field to hide their yellow faces. I have my stash of powder, the knowledge. Also patience. Finding something to live for is my talent. This small raft. And skip that one and read this poem. I actually love this poem. Still life with moving parts. This poem has a couple of words in it. Maybe I'll explain. The word koan, I always thought it was pronounced cone, which is, a riddle, but it's actually pronounced koans. And the word diastole is in reference to the way the heart beats, systole, diastole, the resting phase. Still life with moving parts. I collect koans, the human body made of seawater, the sea made of salt water, how salt can deaden a lake or rim a glass, how turning back turned a woman into salt, the shoreline where tides shift the sand, how glass is made of sand, the tide waters that wave in syncopated rhythms, the silence between breakers. the heart that all its life only rests between beats, the moments in between when there is doubt, how I fall and rise to fall and rise again, the diastole of my heart and of the sea. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I was so riveted by your reading, I forgot to mute myself, which explains the loud car passing. Well, for a quiet island, we have a lot of traffic. And I couldn't help but thinking as I looked at you, having never met you before, I thought you looked so innocent at first. And then I was listening to your reading, I was like, ooh, oh, you have the precision of a surgeon. I loved it. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to exploring much more of your work, and I'm sure everybody else here as well, if they're not already familiar with work. So thank you. I feel like I had one other thought going back to what Lana wrote. I'm going to absolutely be turning in. I was thinking of your poem, If Only, about the Yo-Yo Ma every Sunday morning, and I'm going to definitely check that out. My neighbor, Lisa Bergman, I often turn on the King FM and hear her mellifluous tones greeting me, and so I'm gonna see if that's like one of her segments. It's lovely. I think I'm been worried all evening tonight about internet instability because I'm on my mother's internet, so I have not been able to have as much access to my screen or put it out there for open mic tonight. So I hope you'll forgive me all if I just, quit while I'm ahead while the internet is still working, and thank our 3 featured readers and invite all of you who have attended tonight, many familiar names and faces and some new names. And I want to invite you all to come back. You must always consider yourself welcome as a first-time returning reader coming another month for open mic. But I would like to think that I've been able to carry on the spirit of Esther's founding of this place that is for all genres and new and experienced writers, and always one of the best places, I think, to read for your first time. So even send all your friends. Don't forget that we now all have a date for next September, and I really, really want you to let me know what document you're thinking of. I'm looking at you in particular, Jane Ash. I just know you're going to be right for this, so it's wonderful. All right, well, I am going to end the recording, which means that we also can feel free to chat a bit before we say goodnight.